What is up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today is a difficult day for us Sacramento Kings fans and basketball fans everywhere. Hall of Fame coach Rick Adelman has passed away at the age of 79, as the National Basketball Coaches Association announced earlier today on this Monday, bringing an end to one of the most respected coaching careers in NBA history. Rick Adelman finished with 1,042 career victories, his 10th all time, 16 playoff appearances, and a place among the greatest coaches this game has ever seen. But right here in Sacramento, Rick Adelman wasn't just a coach, he was the architect of the greatest era in Sacramento Kings basketball. And for an entire generation of us fans, Rick Adelman gave this city something it had never experienced before and has only once briefly tasted since: a championship contender. And today, we are remembering the legacy of the greatest coach in Sacramento Kings history. Because when Rick Adelman arrived in Sacramento in September of 1998, the Kings were a franchise searching for relevance. This team had made strides under previous regimes and leadership, but Adelman took things to an entirely different level. Over 8 seasons as the head coach with the Kings, he compiled a 395 to 229 record, still the most wins by any coach in franchise history. And he led the Kings to 8 consecutive playoff appearances and 6 division titles. Think about that for a second. 8 straight playoff appearances. And for younger Kings fans, that may sound normal, but for longtime Kings fans like myself, it was a basketball dream. And after Adelman left in 2006, this team wouldn't return to the playoffs for another 16 to 17 years until the 2022-23 season. That's how significant Rick Adelman's impact was. And Rick Adelman's greatest contribution wasn't just winning during those 2000s years here in Sacramento. It was how his teams won. Because before the NBA became obsessed with ball movement, spacing, and positionless basketball, Rick Adelman's Kings teams, they were already doing it. The offense flowed through passing, players cut constantly, big men facilitating. Everybody touched the ball. Everybody mattered. And that team became what we know as the greatest show on court. A nickname perfectly captured how beautiful of basketball that team in the early 2000s played. When you have players like Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic, Mike Bibby, Doug Christie, Bobby Jackson, just to name a few. And Adelman built one of the most entertaining offenses basketball and the NBA had ever seen. And many of us fans today watch teams like Golden State and see the emphasis on passing, movement, and unselfishness. The roots of that style can be traced back to what Rick Adelman and his staff were doing here in Sacramento over 2 decades ago. And Rick Adelman was ahead of his time. And Sacramento became basketball's coolest secret. And we want to talk about the way the team play, but let's talk about the title that got away. Because no discussion of Adelman's legacy here in Sacramento can happen without talking about 2002. Because that team in 2001, 02 won a franchise record 61 games. And if you ask anyone in basketball, they would consider that team to be the best team in the NBA that season. Then came the legendary Western Conference Finals against our bitter arch rivals, the Lakers. 7 games, 2 heavyweights, and one of the most controversial playoff series in NBA history. Because the Kings were 1 win away from reaching the NBA Finals. And they would have won. They were 1 win away from bringing this city its first championship. But it never happened because LA advanced and the championship dream slipped away. But here's what's remarkable. More than 2 decades later, we are still talking about those Kings teams. Not because they won the title, they didn't win the title, because they played the game the right way. They represented this city because they captured the imagination of basketball fans, not just here in Sacramento, but around the globe. And because Rick Adelman made them unforgettable, he made that team unforgettable. And one thing you hear over and over whenever you hear people talk about Rick Adelman, players loved him. He wasn't a screamer. He wasn't trying to dominate every room. He led with intelligence, with respect, with humility. And the Kings, in their statement, described Rick Adelman as someone who inspired people through integrity, kindness, and teamwork. And that's why Adelman's impact extends beyond the wins and losses. And when us fans remember those Kings teams, we remember the joy. We remember the community. We remember Arco Arena shaking every game, every night. And we remember believing. Rick Adelman gave this city belief. And for a city that often felt overlooked by the national media, he made this city matter. And he made Sacramento Kings basketball relevant. And he made Sacramento proud. And that's not just a motto. That's what Sacramento proud represents. And current Kings head coach Doug Christie, who was one of Adelman's players during those 2000 years teams, many of the values that we as fans still celebrate today, the teamwork, toughness, unselfish basketball, community, that can still be traced back to the culture Rick Adelman helped build, because his fingerprints are still all over this franchise. And if we're being honest, there is no debate. Rick Adelman is the greatest coach in Sacramento Kings history. There's no one close. Nobody. Not because he won the most games, not because he made the most playoff appearances, but because he created the standard in Sacramento. Every successful team that hasn't been alive since has been compared to those Rick Adelman teams. Every exciting era gets measured against the magic of those early 2000s teams. Now that is legacy. And today, we as a city, as a team, and as fans, we're not just mourning a head coach, we are mourning a basketball icon, a Hall of Famer, a mentor, a leader, and the man who gave us fans some of the greatest memories that we have ever experienced. Rest in peace, Coach Rick Adelman. Thank you. Thank you for the playoff runs. And thank you for the greatest show on court. And thank you for making Sacramento believe that a small market team could dream big. For generations of fans, your legacy will never fade, will never go away. Light the beam for Coach Rick Adelman tonight. And may Rick Adelman forever be remembered as the coach who changed Sacramento Kings basketball forever. And as always, go Kings and light the beam. Rest in peace, Rick Adelman.